I kicked my sister-in-law out of the house after I found out she locked my son in the room and slept with my ex on camera. I showed the video to my family, and now she's not sorry. Until now, there haven't been any problems. She is a sweet young lady. She's always been nice to me, and we used to get along great. My spouse and I both turned 30 years old. We dated through college before being married 7 years ago. We met in college and were married shortly after. Terry, our 4-year-old son, is also with us. Due to his job, my spouse spends the majority of the week away from home and only returns on the weekends. We're glad that Jennifer moved in with us because it saves us money on a sitter, as I also have work during the week. Terry doesn't start kindergarten until the following year, so up until now, we've been able to avoid taking him to daycare or hiring babysitters because both my parents and my in-laws were always willing to watch him. However, we wanted to be fair to them because they are also growing older, so we decided that having Jennifer here would be beneficial for everyone. My husband felt it would be better for Jennifer to live with us so she could have her own place. She could have continued to live with her parents. She works from home so she can watch our son. Our in-laws were a bit too controlling, and so far it's been a fantastic arrangement for us. She has been living with us while she starts her career, and because she works for a new company that is also just getting started, her pay is a little on the low side. She can't really afford the rent at the moment, so my husband told her she could move in with us, and I was okay with that. An unexpected plus was that when Terry got home, she was prepared to take care of him. Since we've known one another for a very long time and I have faith in her, I didn't find anything strange about her suggestion. When my husband would return home on the weekends that I had off, we would all spend the day together. She's pleasant, quiet, and generally private, but I've recently noticed that Terry had been acting extremely strangely around Jennifer. Before this, Terry had never caused any trouble, but since last week or thereabouts, I'd observed that he would cling to me while I was at home and wouldn't leave me in a room by myself with Jennifer. I didn't really notice that at first because I assumed he was just being a typical child and following me around. However, things started to get strange because he wasn't particularly needy and occasionally preferred being by himself. He was largely just following me about whenever Jennifer was in the living room, and he didn't appear to want to be with her, so I thought that this was weird behavior and that I wanted to find out why. I wanted my son to be honest with me about everything, so a few days ago, I sat him down and asked him what was upsetting him because I had seen his behavior with his aunt. He was quite hesitant to talk to me at first, but I reassured him that Jennifer was not at home and that she had no intention of hurting him. It was the ideal time because Jennifer had informed me she was going to stay the night at a friend's house because they were having a party that evening, and I had just returned home from work. Terry started chatting to me and said he didn't like being with Jennifer anymore. After I made sure he was certain that she wasn't at home, as a mother, my first reaction was to naturally ask him if she had done anything to him. Thankfully, he said that although she hadn't hurt him directly, he didn't appreciate spending the entire day shut up in the house. I asked him to clarify because I didn't understand what he meant. He said that Jennifer would make sure to send him to the nursery and instruct him to stay there for a few hours as soon as I left the house. He mentioned that he enjoyed going through the backyard of the house. He didn't enjoy being locked in a room. But it seems his aunt warned him that if he attempted to leave or made a scene, I would chastise him when I got home from work. He was so forced to remain silent in the room as he became utterly bored. Though it wasn't harmful in and of itself, I didn't like the sound of her blocking him in his room. Therefore, I found it really unusual. Terry told me that he hadn't told me about this before because he was afraid I would be upset with him, but that he also wanted to tell me that he didn't really like Jennifer because she would lock him up every day. Now that I was asking, I had to talk to Jennifer and take action after he expressed his want to leave the room in the morning and his dislike of being stuck there, and he made me swear that neither Jennifer nor I would chastise him for this. I realized then that she had put a lot of pressure on him, and he was afraid to confront me and tell me the truth. All of this was quite suspicious, and I should have definitely challenged her about it, but instead, I chose to investigate her actions in detail. Because, in the event that they were unethical, I needed documentation, and I doubt I would receive that if I addressed her. To be clear, I had nothing personal against her. Nonetheless, if she was involved in any questionable activities, I needed evidence to support my claims. Because my husband's family is quite close, I didn't want to make any unfounded charges. For that reason, I called a buddy that evening and asked him to install nanny cams in the kitchen and living room. If I hadn't pointed it out to them, they would never have realized it was there because they were so well hidden. Terry was kept occupied while the cameras were being installed because I was worried that he would somehow reveal the existence of the cameras, but after everything was finished, all I had to do was wait until she was home the following day to find out exactly what she would be doing. She stayed over that night at her friend's house and returned early the following morning right before I had to leave for work. So before I went, we had a pleasant, typical conversation, and that was all. However, I had no intention of working. All I was intending to do was monitor my nanny cams while we were next door. My neighbor had previously responded negatively when I questioned her if she had observed any odd activity in or around my home, or if Jennifer had been hosting any guests. I would be nearby to step in if things went wrong. Since she had very kindly enabled me to monitor what was happening from her home, from where I had positioned my camera, I could see the nursery door. Sure enough, Jennifer pushed him into the room exactly as Terry had warned me would happen only minutes after my departure. Despite the fact that he continued to argue and showed no sign of entering the room, after a time, I could hear a slight argument coming from their room, but the microphones were not close enough to pick up on what she was saying. She then closed the door and locked him inside. Terry was a really calm youngster who didn't really bother others, so I was shocked that she did that. He merely likes to stroll around the house or in the garden, so if this had anything to do with her work, she didn't need to worry because she could work and watch him at the same time. I wanted to learn more, but there was a part of me that wanted to run over to my own house and let my son out. I therefore just let everything play out naturally. I couldn't understand why she would lock my son in his room. She was just sitting on the couch and browsing, which seemed harmless enough. After waiting for approximately an hour, I saw that she had gone to the kitchen. I then changed to the cameras in the kitchen, and sure enough, there it was. She let a guy in through the kitchen door, but I couldn't tell who he was because he was wearing a hoodie. The man had not taken off his hoodie until they were back in the living room. Then I knew exactly who it was. It was Marcus, my former lover, who Jennifer had only heard about because he was an insane stalker, and I had been whining about him for a few years. To put things in perspective, I had dated Marcus for a few months before meeting my husband. We weren't even serious. We had just gone on a few dates and gotten together once. It was during my first few months of college, and I quickly came to the conclusion that we were not destined to be together because of how intense and different he was from me. I made the decision to break up with him, and 2 weeks later, I began dating my husband. Since we hadn't even been serious, I honestly didn't think he would take it too hard. However, it seems that he had a strong affection for me and had even informed his acquaintances about me. I started getting called names by everyone because I was seeing someone else weeks after I ended things with him. However, I didn't give a damn about it because I was with the person I truly liked. Aside from my husband, who shared my feelings, he didn't give a damn about what Marcus or his pals thought of me. I had made it quite evident to him as well as to Marcus that neither of us was serious throughout our time together. I therefore failed to see why he believed that we would wind up together. I had informed him that I was only planning a quick fling and wasn't really interested, but he became obsessed with me. A couple of years back, I was pregnant when I had to get a restraining order against him since he had started stalking me. I didn't want anything awful to happen to me or my unborn child. It was only because of his unstable and psychotic behavior that we were ever able to obtain a restraining order against him. He texted me every weekend after our split and after we graduated from college in an attempt to rekindle our relationship. However, I never answered him. Despite my repeated attempts to block his accounts, he continued to create new ones. After a while, I gave up because it was meaningless and I wasn't really suffering by it, so I stopped blocking it and instead began to ignore it. To clarify, my spouse was aware of the incident from the beginning and expressed no concerns about my handling of it. He had instructed me to come to him, and we would go to the police together if things got too serious, but it never came to that point, thank goodness. But shortly after I announced my engagement, right before I was married, he started phoning and pleading with me to call him back and call off the engagement. To get him off my back, I returned his calls a few times, even insulting him in the hopes that it would damage his ego and cause him to quit phoning. But he was not arrogant. He kept calling, and I had to tell him that I had filed for a restraining order against him before he finally stopped when I hired a lawyer. Naturally, he was concerned that I was bluffing, so he assured me that he would return. But aside from a few texts informing me that he missed me and that he knew we would one day be together, he didn't trouble me throughout the course of the following several years. Nothing too grave was present. However, that was before I became pregnant. The stalking began when I revealed it on social media during my second semester. Even though I had delayed making the announcement for the first few days, I was unaware of it. But after that, I began to observe a white car with tinted windows following me everywhere I went. After a few days, I started to get pretty scared of it. I made the decision to inform my spouse and call the police about it. After learning that it belonged to Marcus, we discovered that he had been pursuing me ever since. On social media, I made a pregnancy announcement, and he was sobbing and pleading with me to take him back as soon as he was brought in, saying he didn't even mind that I was carrying someone else's child. He remarked that I could no longer punish him in this way and suggested that I leave my husband. I was genuinely afraid since it was so insane. That's the day I made the decision to pursue a restraining order and bring legal action against him. He didn't annoy me throughout the 2 years we had one, so we didn't need to apply for another. I didn't bother with him after that because I reasoned that he might have gotten his act together and forgotten about me after one restraining order. Additionally, he didn't disturb me or text me during or after that time, so I haven't thought about him at all. However, I knew this was inappropriate when I witnessed him hanging around and making love with Jennifer in my house. As Jennifer suggests, I wasn't envious. Instead, I was upset because it was representative of all this guy had made me go through. She had even invited him to stay at my house and was still with him. I saved the recording and hurried over to my house right away, not wanting to alert them by entering through the living room door because it would be locked, and I would have to use my keys, and they could probably hear that. It was ridiculous that she would have the audacity to do that, and to think that she would get away with it while she had locked my son inside his room. It's time to assist Marcus in getting out the rear door. I entered the living room and approached them as they were cuddling on the couch. I yelled at Jennifer and pretended that Marcus wasn't there because I didn't want to speak with him. I also asked her what she thought she was doing because I had assumed that she was mature enough to make wise choices when she was at home with my son. However, that was obviously untrue. She attempted self-defense, claiming that since she and Marcus had been dating for about a year, I should not be concerned because they were both in love. However, it wasn't even about them for me. She had been lying to me and keeping my son in his room, and I was furious because all she wanted was to hang out with her so-called boyfriend, who happened to be my insane ex. What had really gotten to me was that she was lying to me and mistreating my son, and I could no longer stand it. I was not going to let this go, so I informed her that she had to leave right away or I would call the police on them both. Terry was out of the room, and in the interim, Marcus had promised not to cause me any trouble and had departed out the back door. However, the reason he was here was that he was in love with Jennifer, and she persisted in trying to dissuade me from throwing her out of the house because at the moment she had nowhere else to go. However, that wasn't my issue. I told her that there was no way I was going to let her live with us any longer because she had irreparably shattered my confidence in the worst way imaginable. She should have given it some thought before letting my ex-stalker into my home. She made an effort to persuade me that Marcus wasn't the same person. She explained that the reason he had been behaving poorly was that he had been in treatment for a very long period and was under a lot of psychological pressure at the time I had to obtain a restraining order against him. However, it seems that this altered his life, setting him on the correct path. Following that, she informed me that she had encountered him almost a year prior at a pub. He had approached her, initially recognizing her from the wedding pictures, and he wanted to apologize to her. He also asked Jennifer to apologize to me on his behalf because it was inappropriate for him to come to me. She seemed to have felt sorry for him at the time. After she made the decision to speak with him, he ended the evening by asking her out on a date. First of all, she seemed to think it was because he was my age and she is much younger, which was really strange and not at all romantic. He had to have been around 29, and she was just 21 at the time. More importantly, she had no business bringing him around me or my family because she knew about his past. If that's not weird, I don't know what is. I don't know why she felt that he should visit, especially when I was the one who was extending a favor to her by allowing her to move in with me. I didn't need to let her live with me, and even if we weren't connected by blood, it would have been extremely easy for me to locate a sitter and replace her. However, I had trusted her because I liked her. She completely betrayed my confidence in her by taking it. It was therefore absurd and unrealistic for her to think that I would still allow her to remain with me and would forgive her for what she had done. Furthermore, it involved more than simply the Marcus issue. It also had to do with the way she'd been handling my son. I did not appreciate her locking Terry in his room to have sex with her partner, and I would not absolve her of her actions. I was going to refuse to let her live with me under any circumstances. I told her angrily that she had to leave the house. She eventually accepted that I had made up my mind and departed after much pleading and shouting. She had simply asked that I keep it a secret from her parents since she knew they would be furious because this was clearly wrong. I said nothing about guarantees. I watched her go, standing there in silence. It had been a really stressful morning, so I put Terry to sleep after the entire incident, but I still had to tell my husband what had happened. This is most likely where I was at this moment. I didn't have to do anything, but I was so enraged at her actions that I felt compelled to get revenge. I was furious that I had put my trust in her and that she had chosen to live under my roof with the person I detested the most rather than honoring that trust and doing the right thing. I couldn't help but become enraged over it. I chose to send the tape to the family group rather than my husband, even though I knew it would not be in her best interests. As I previously stated, my husband's family is very tight and takes their ties very seriously. One of my husband's aunts was cut off by my in-laws last year because she had been disparaging my spouse, and they would not stand for it. Thus, I truly mean it when I say that they take their relationships very seriously, and I knew they would be furious when they discovered what Jennifer had been up to behind our backs. However, I still went ahead and did it knowing that, and the outcome was as I had anticipated. That day, her parents severed their relationship with her and ceased communicating with her. My spouse was astounded that this occurred and that Jennifer would act in such a manner. She was suffering through enough already, so I was the one to convince him to dismiss the accusations he had almost planned to bring against her. My in-laws called me to apologize on behalf of their daughter and let me know that they would not be speaking to her again. After I had forwarded that video to the group, they were furious, as I had anticipated, and my spouse felt the same way. She's been cut off by them all. In summary, she essentially has no one to live with at the moment. She texted me a few hours earlier informing me that I had essentially destroyed her life by sharing that video to the family group. So I know this. She doesn't really have many friends, and the ones she does have don't allow her to live with them because they have roommates as well. She would find it really strange to live with those friends. Some of them live with their parents. Marcus lives with his parents, who are unaware about her yet. Therefore, she is unable to live with him either, and he can't tell them because he would lose his house, and they would lose their heads if they discovered she was related to us. She basically has two options at this point: either find an apartment, which will be difficult for her given her wage, or start looking for a better job, which she cannot do while homeless. It's a dilemma, and I feel terrible about placing her in that predicament, even though I know I shouldn't have to. I still feel horrible for her because I'm the only reason she's in difficulty at the moment. I'm not sure, but I think that rather than merely trying to do the right thing, my response may have been a little too strong and motivated by rage. Furthermore, it's not as if I was unaware that this would occur. I knew exactly what kind of response my husband's family would have to this. Nevertheless, when I discussed it with my husband, he felt that I was overanalyzing it, even though I knew that I had submitted the video to the family group and felt deeply guilty for what was happening to her. I'm not really to blame for this. Jennifer bears the responsibility for her actions. Even if you choose to overlook Marcus's past transgressions and give them the benefit of the doubt, it doesn't justify what she did with Terry. We're still working to address the anxiety he had from spending too much time in his room because she used to lock him in there for hours at a time. I mean, she kind of had this coming, and it would be absurd to hold me responsible for it. I can't get rid of the idea that I am to blame, even though this is something she did to herself. I simply feel awful, especially in light of the message she sent me. She seems desperate right now, which doesn't improve the circumstance or my feelings about it. I failed to remember that my sister-in-law was having problems with her family as a result of her hooking up with my stalker ex. Update: thanks for your assurances, everyone. That was a huge assistance in handling and processing all of the things that have been going on. Additionally, several of you have inquired as to whether I have considered sending my son to therapy, and the answer is that I have. That's a notion that my spouse and I have been kicking about since the day we learned about his sister. Thus, we may begin in a few days. Once again, I appreciate your concern very much. Update 2. Today, over 2 weeks after the incident, my husband, his family, and I got an email from Jennifer that was by no means an apology. She doesn't need to apologize to me, much to my disappointment, because I already know I won't forgive her. Still, I don't care. However, the purpose of the email was to inform us that she and Marcus were still together and had not yet broken up, despite our best attempts to think otherwise. She said that it seemed that everything that had occurred to me had been necessary for Marcus to finally meet her. She said that I was envious of her, but I just needed to get over it and acknowledge that he had moved on. I have no idea where that came from because I had never once expressed a desire for the kind of attention Marcus had been showing me. I wanted him to be as far away from me as possible because I detested that attention. Therefore, no, I wasn't in the least bit jealous, and if she believed that I had revealed her affair with Marcus to the world because I was, she was mistaken. In addition, my spouse determined that the email was absurd and narcissistic, and we would just not open it the next time she sent it. Reading it wasn't even worthwhile. To be honest, though, after reading that email, I was relieved that I had shared that family group video with everyone rather than just my husband, as everyone should be aware of what a terrible person she truly was. Update 3. Hello to all of you. We haven't spoken to Jennifer in a year, but from what we've heard, she recently got married to Marcus and went to Canada. Additionally, she recently disclosed that she is pregnant, and it seems that both she and Marcus are doing well. She made the announcement about a week ago. It's really excellent for her. The ironic part is that I'm already in my second trimester, and my spouse and I are also expecting a child. It's not well, but we will undoubtedly announce it soon enough. Regarding Terry, he is thrilled to be a big brother. My spouse and I are also extremely happy about this, and we will make sure that this time we don't make a mistake by hiring a terrible babysitter.